Welcome to Wired for Change. I'm your host, Amy Yee, and I'm thrilled to finally bring this podcast to life. This is a show where we explore change in terms of how we get from here to there, whether it's optimization or innovation or transformation. It's how the intersection of business and technology and social impact looks when we bring it all together and move it forward. And we learn about this by talking to the people who are making change happen. This is our inaugural show. And so what I've done is I've asked a special guest to join us, Rich Napoli. And he is my co-host from my previous podcast, which was an audio-only podcast called the Weekly Standup with Rich and Amy. So there's no one better to help kick off my new podcast. Rich Napoli, welcome. You're the one and only Rich Napoli. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate you coming in. How are you?
Good, Amy. Good. It's good to be back on the show with you. It's been, I think the last time we did something like this was back in 2019. One of the last shows we had on blockchain radio there. So it is good to be on the mic with you again. And a little hard not to jump in and start talking about blockchain right away, but I know this show is something much more than that, right?
That's right. That's right. We want to take a broader look at, technology and how it enables change, but also the people, the process, and the data side, and really how, our thinking has evolved around all of these things. But blockchain was a lot of fun to talk about. I think we had that show running for 3 years or something like that, and we were heard in 90 countries or something, and we had a lot of fun. And we emulated a daytime TV show, the Regis and Kelly show, where you were the Regis and I was the Kelly, guy. Of course.
As if they don't need to see that, but yes.
Of course. That was a lot of fun. And so excited to bring this new podcast to life with you, for sure. So thanks again for coming.
Yeah. Well, in some ways I feel like I'm going to be interviewing you a little bit just to get your listeners to understand the show. But you talked about the model we used for the blockchain radio show was the Regis and Kelly paradigm. For Wired for Change, I think you have a different paradigm in mind, right? So tell us about, why Wired for Change and what's your paradigm for this one?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the idea of wired for change, I think of wired as having two meanings, like wired as in, technology was traditionally, wired, right. Although it's, not so wired anymore.
Wireless now.
That's right. It's kind of an old term. It really dates me back to my electrical engineering days, I guess. But that's part of the wired for change. It's the technology enabled, change, whether it's idea, product, or process. And then it's wired is like the idea of being excited, like you're wired. You've hopped up on caffeine like I usually am. And, just being wired and excited about change and how to make that change happen. So that's how I named the podcast as Wired for Change, because I really want to think about, change on a micro scale, like when you're looking at individual users maybe, but also the impact that it can have globally. What is that impact that we're having on the world and on society with change and impact? Or what is the change that we want to have or aspire to? And maybe we don't have that yet. And so that's the Wired for Change part. And then I think, the vision for this really sprang from my childhood. One of my many childhood dreams, it's a big dreamer. One of my many childhood dreams was to be, one day kind of like the Oprah, for technology. So another television show that we're kind of emulating here with this podcast. But my takeaways from, Oprah days was really about telling really good stories, engaging people, and helping people, and giving away a lot of free stuff. So if you have free stuff that I can give away on this show, please contact me. That's right. Everybody gets stuff. So eventually I hope that we can do that, and maybe not with all the drama that came with Oprah, but, I will say there can be a lot of drama and transformation, particularly. You can get some people on here to talk about the times that they had. Could be quite interesting, but that's, I guess, where it came from. It came from something that I've always wanted to do, and I'm kind of doing this for me, and I'm learning, really, and hopefully there'll be some benefit for people who tune in and subscribe. So I hope that people do subscribe to the show.
Yeah, sure. Well, this kind of, much like Oprah found a way to sort of connect with her audience and bring the human element into the dialogue. I think that's something that you have a basic innate talent for is focusing on the human dimension of change and technology. And I mean, I saw you do it. I was on the board, on your board of directors there for a while at HSO, and saw you execute some digital transformation. So maybe rather than me tell everyone about your background, maybe you want to just give them a little, insight to how you got here, and you know, things I already know about you, but probably your audience doesn't know. So I think it's worth a little explanation.
Well, thanks so much, Rich. And I do hope that I can bring some perspective, although I'm not saying that I have all the answers or everything. But I do want to do more than just report on change. I want to help bring the lens of execution, to it. I started off in electrical engineering at Carleton University, and from there, I was very fortunate to be able to work in innovation and then optimization and then in transformation. So I can speak a little bit of all three of those languages associated with that type of change. And so from an innovation perspective, I got a chance to work in venture capital with VCs and then work with a number of startups. And that was a terrific experience, and started two of my own companies as well from an innovation perspective. And that, was product, process, service type of innovation. And then moving on to work in consulting. So with a boutique digital consultancy, helping big companies like Fortune 500 companies to look at optimizations that they could make to their existing processes and technology and people. How do we take, what's there and just make some improvements, to it. And that was terrific. Lots of scaled change in those types of organizations. And then to move on to work within healthcare. I've been very fortunate to get to learn about healthcare from within it in a transformation kind of role as a chief digital officer, chief business transformation officer, chief digital transformation officer, with all of the accountability for everything digital, helping to push that forward as well. So accountability for IT, cybersecurity, enterprise platforms, procurement of new platforms, bringing all of those things together, working very closely with the business at that point of time, and then looking at the social impact that we could have from within those organizations.
Yeah, that it's been wonderful to watch you grow and develop as a chief digital officer, and see the impact you've made both. As you know, I'm the retired CEO of a software engineering company, Relevantz, and we worked with you a bit on that at HSO. And we're focused on the innovation part, the technology part, because that's our business. But I think your insights, it's more, it's so much more than about technology, right? It's so much more about the people and the process. The engineers view the world as the technology is in the middle of the circle and everything else is small around it. In your view, it's a small piece, and the people and process is so much bigger around that. So I think that's something you're looking to focus on here, right? And just the bigger picture of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when I was in consulting, I wasn't working from a technology perspective. It was really much more of a user experience perspective and user-centered design and human-centered design kind of perspective. And so bringing those things together was very key for me. So thanks for pulling that out.
Yeah,
for sure.
that's a key thing. I wanted you keep going back to those three terms, and I find those so enlightening. The difference between innovation, optimization, and transformation. And I think, we both know that many digital transformation projects fail, and I wonder if sometimes it's because we don't understand the difference between those, and making sure understanding as an organization which one are we trying to achieve. So can you kind of give us a little more detail? What are the differences between those?
Yeah, I can try. And so I don't want to offend anyone either who's out there working in innovation or optimization or transformation. There's so many people who are doing, terrific work. And so, I'll just present maybe a little bit about how I think about it. Because innovation, for example, can take on so many forms, right? You could innovate on a product or a process or an idea. As I said, you could be working, very much within an existing ecosystem, or you could be starting, with more of a blank slate. So there's lots of different flavors, I think, of each of those things. But if you look at like a restaurant analogy, for instance, I like food a lot, so I like
Yes,
restaurants.
I know.
So I will use a lot of food analogies. You like car analogies, so I know you're going to use a lot of car analogies.
Right.
But from a restaurant perspective, innovation is generally creating something new. So if you're creating like a new cuisine, for example, you're still like, let's say you're still using the same restaurant, the same people are creating it, but you're creating like a new dish or a new type of cuisine that you are offering at your restaurant to your patrons, for example, who are coming in and your clients. So that's more of an innovation perspective. From an optimization perspective, generally you're taking something and you're improving something that already exists. So maybe you're introducing, a very fancy kind of blender as opposed to mixing things by hand and speeding up the process and making things more efficient, within the kitchen, for example. I wish I could make things more efficient in my kitchen. A self-cleaning kitchen would make it much more efficient, right? And so that's more of an optimization. You're taking something that's existing and you're making improvements. And then I think in transformation, you might be shifting from like a dine-in kind of restaurant to an all digital kind of delivery only cloud kitchen, completely different model with different ways of preparing and serving the food, scaling out, and doing something very, very different from what you were originally doing. And that is more like a transformation. And each of them involve, a different type of path. And a different level of resistance. And I think that a lot of people would say that transformation is probably the hardest and the most complex of them because of all the things that it requires. So how it requires a mindset shift. It requires letting go of old behaviors and all of the things that made it strong to date. So the longer that you have a system or an organization or a collection of processes or a product, the longer it's had to build up and fortify what's existing and what's already there. And probably the more it needs transformation. Does that make sense to you, Rich?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
that's a good
great.
analogy. Yeah,
Great.
you're getting you always say I'm good at analogies. That's a perfect analogy. I get it now, and I think that's
Thanks.
something that a lot of organizations and people in organizations don't understand those distinctions, and they know they got to change. I mean, every organization out there is like, if we don't, change and adapt to this modern world, digital world, we're going to be out of business. So they all get that, but they don't know what it means uh, to take that first step and which are we trying to actually do? Because you're right, transformation is the biggest and hardest of them all, and a lot of them get talked into that because that's what the media talks about. That's what the books are written about. But there's there's other options here that may be more impactful and smaller steps, frankly, than the big one. And I think that's getting back to your sort of wired for change concept here. I think that's part of what you're looking to do, right? Is to there's only a few books, and all the books are focused on the big stuff, the digital transformation, and it's very, I don't know, theoretical and not necessarily grounded in reality, right? And I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
it's a
Absolutely.
theory. Yeah.
Yeah, when you think about it, like a lot of people say, well, the culture part is the hardest part, but what does that really mean, practically speaking? Like, what do we mean? Like, why is everyone so resistant to it? Why does transformation have so much resistance? And it's so many different things. So, from a cultural perspective, for example, if you are moving your data to the cloud and you're going from on-prem to the cloud, for example, in order to do all the magical, wonderful things that you want to do, you have to manage that data very differently internally, and you have to go from IT has to go from like a protect and restrict kind of mentality to one that is more about compliance and governance and trust, and that's a very different place to go to for the business users, and being able to empower the business users the way that they want is very different as well. And just the idea of challenging all of those things that make today, really strong, and changing all of that and having your business model change and cannibalize your existing business model. One thing I was thinking about last night was just, how these business models change when you're looking at a full transformation. And it often will cannibalize your existing revenue. But from an organizational standpoint, you want your existing revenue because you want to be able to fund the transformation, right? And you want to be able to say, well, we can always fall back to having that existing, revenue, that existing stable revenue. But actually, that transition from the old to the new is a very, very difficult thing to manage and to do from a financial standpoint, particularly when transformation projects take so long. So to contrast, with innovation and optimization, innovation and optimization can often show, early quick wins. Like, we've created something new, or look, this is very cool and it's doing something very different. It's innovative, and that's sexy, right? And it's great. It's a lot of fun. And optimization, you kind of know what you've improved, and everybody generally wants improvement. It can be hard because you will change people, and some people their jobs may change, but not as much as with transformation. And generally people are pretty happy with the efficiency gains and the operational kind of gains that they do get, and the quick wins. But the transformation kind of quick wins are a lot harder to come by, and they're harder to recognize, and they're part of a much more complex game that has a much less clear path than innovation and optimization. So those are just a few of the ideas that I think of when I'm contrasting them. And you can have innovation and optimization as part of a transformation, but it can still be a very different beast. So to your point, having more resources and sharing knowledge, and a lot of people haven't really figured it out. I haven't figured it out. There's a lot to figure out, and the challenge is that all of these failed transformations, so with like 70% of transformations, fail. It's a lot of money, and it's a lot of resources. And my personal, worry, I guess, or concern is, and I think a concern shared by a lot of people, is that when it comes to things that we all need, right, like healthcare, like being able to live, to preserve our world, to continue with the services that we need to stay around. I mean, with all of this wasted kind of money or failed transformations, or without the critical mass of skills and expertise to move us forward in the direction that we need to go in, we may lose those services. We will continue to erode the quality of life and the things that we want to be able to do as a society. I think I was thinking also about, the tension. So, when the world continues to change and technology continues to change, that's like holding one end of an elastic, right? And then if you have, an organization or a system that is not changing, the more this pulls, like the technology kind of tension pulls, and the more sort of your organization and your processes stay the same, that tension becomes greater and greater, until one day that organization will not be able to operate. Like the tension will snap like an elastic band. And so those are some of the things that I worry about. Or the people who are trying to affect the change will snap like an elastic band, which I think, we've seen before as well. So just some thoughts as a preview. But really, again, I think there are lots of people out there with fantastic knowledge and resources that can come and hopefully, chat with us and help us to understand more about the landscape shifts that are taking place and how to affect change.
Yeah, I think that's to me, the promise of this show is just, I can read a book about it, and it's like reading a book on how to hit a ball. If you can read all the books you want, but until you actually do it, you don't know. You don't have that muscle memory to actually know how to do it, right? So I think you're going to be bringing in some people that have been through this, or are going through it, or failed at it, or succeeded at it, and share those results so that we get a more experiential view of this. So we can adapt ourselves, our own strategies, to the realities of what it actually takes to steer the battleship. As I said, the bigger the company, the longer it takes to turn directions, right? And it's so hard to do. The technology is almost the easiest part, even though that's enormously challenging. It's the easier part compared to changing everybody's mindset and the reward system. Changing them so that they're now motivated to do something different than they've done before, because they've been compensated one way, and now that it's all different. So I think you're bringing the right people in from different. I assume you're gonna do it, not in any one vertical. You're gonna go across industry, both for-profit, non-profit, and so on, and government organizations, and looking because that's the other thing that might change is how you might approach it from a for-profit organization versus a nonprofit versus a government versus a military. Who knows? I assume you're going all across those. Is that right?
all across those. And I think that there are things that the different industries can learn from each other in terms of practicing and what works and what doesn't. And there are some things that are very specific to certain industries as well. And folks, working with different technologies to bring things to life also. So it'll be fairly broad. There's a lot to talk about, and there are a lot of really interesting people out there who are working on fantastic things that I want to bring to light, and kind of improve just the access to these people and this knowledge and these practices for everyone involved, so that we can connect those dots.
It sounds like it's going to be a great podcast series. I look forward to seeing it all. And I know you are going to have some sponsors. Is that right? At some point? Uh,
I hope to get sponsors to help to continue to meet our mission and spread the word and message. But it will always be very clear when we've got a sponsor message or sponsored content, or sponsorship kind of engagement and things, because I want to make sure that everyone again has access to the ideas from the people who are making it happen in a way that is very clear to people, and help enable their decision making and what's right for them, what is the right thing to do for their users.
yeah. Yeah. Good. Well, I think we look forward to this. How often are you going to be doing this? Each podcast?
Well, hopefully we can release one a week, but as you and I know from our past experience, things don't always work perfectly.
The weekly stand-up. Yeah, the weekly stand-up. They're bringing that
Right.
about once a month. Yeah.
That was weekly, sure. So yeah, but there's a lot to put out there, and I look forward to doing as much in person with guests as possible. Also, I've got lots of folks, like some great folks lined up on AI and cybersecurity and resilience, data. There's a lot of things to explore and talk about, and I want to know, really, I love listening to what people want to know about. So go to my website, wired-for-change.com, and have a look at, either pitch an idea or, let us know you're interested in being a sponsor, sponsoring a particular show or topic, for example. And we'll go from there. Happy to discuss and hear what's top of mind for people and what we can look at.
Yeah. Sounds great, Amy. Thank you. I know, one last question, maybe. Who are you aiming this show for, in terms of the kind of audience that you expect to get value out of this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think having been in the leadership, echelon of the organization, I think it would be helpful for a lot of C-suite and leaders to look at, but also practitioners of transformation who are helping to drive change, and then those user champions, because one of the keys to success is really engaging your users and your clients and others in transformation, and for them to understand what's happening and how they can contribute and engage, and some of the dynamics involved, I think, is a healthy thing as well. So it's a fairly broad audience. And if you're brand new to transformation, if you're a student coming out of school, like, Rich, you talk to a lot of students, you teach a digital transformation course at Catholic University, you see students, do you think that they would benefit from, hearing some of these topics or discussions?
Absolutely. I mean, I find that the young, I'm teaching sophomores and juniors, undergraduate, and they are great consumers of technology, but because it's unbelievable, but the ones in college have been born like 2004, 2005, or something like that. They've never lived in a world without the kind of technology that we see today. And so for them, what do you mean transformation? There's no need for it. We're already fully digital, right? And for them as consumers, they're right. I mean, the big companies have all aligned, Google and Amazon and Apple and, have all, put a digital native kind of front on everything. But, some of them are going to go to work in companies where that transformation is not complete or maybe not even started. And they're going to be facing, technology from 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Maybe one of our customers, they were helping them get off technology that was developed in the 60s, right? And still running massive amounts of work. So they need to first be aware that a transformation is still required, and then what does it look like, and then how to get it done. So they're really they have no idea that there's any need for it. So it's kind of fun So it'd be good for them to hear from more than just me. I mean, I lived through a lot of this stuff. I was writing code in the 70s, right? So, I mean, some of the, I've lived through a lot of that, but they just look at me as some kind of freakazoid. So it'd be good to hear
No, they
from
don't.
other people that are actually doing it and living it and recognizing the need for it. So yeah, I think they would definitely evaluate it as well.
It's so funny that you're going into this digital transformation course teaching them about old things. Right? In some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I have to
I know
balance
it's new things, but it's the gap, right? It's the
yeah.
gap
I mean,
for
I
them.
certainly I teach a lot about AI and blockchain and data analytics and 3D printing and virtual reality, because those are all things that are becoming real today. But I have to give them a balance to say this is where it came from, and this is where it is. A lot of times, we talk about ERP systems and CRM systems, and they're like, "What the heck is that?" And yet, it's so fundamental to many business operations. So I try to balance it between, here's the great future that you're already part of, but here's the past that you're shackled to.
That's
And
right.
help
It's true.
them
And
better.
that's for sure. And that's what it comes down to. And every show will try to really help people define and understand, the here to there, right? The here to there, and what is that kind of desired shift, and what does that kind of look like? So, to answer your question, I think that this podcast I'm hoping has a fairly wide audience, hoping that people learn. But I really want to hear, the feedback and learn from people, and hopefully have you back as well, Rich. And looking forward to
Yeah.
tapping into the community. And again, I hope that people like and subscribe and help to build kind of this movement to take away some of the gatekeeping. I mean, I think there are lots of ways to learn about transformation now. As you mentioned, there are books and there are conferences and things, but let's look at how to level the playing field. Let's bring more knowledge out. Let's make it more accessible to people. Let's take it out from behind kind of the walls and put it right out there. And we're not trying to be right, but we are trying to help help people to share and connect dots more.
Okay, Oprah.
All right. I'm going to get in trouble for that. All right. Okay. Thanks so much, Rich.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
Good. Best of luck to you, Amy. Good luck.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.